Now, would you agree that domestic abuse can be verbal?
Absolutely, yes.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be emotional?
Yes, certainly.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be psychological?
Yes.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be physical?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated, and I believe you testified in your direct, that it's very important to review the treatment records before forming opinions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, that's the first thing you would do, correct?
Not necessarily the first, but it's part of the evaluation.
Now, before we start getting into the ones that you testified about, I just want to be really clear about what you actually have as an opinion with respect to the borderline personality disorder and the histrionics. You didn't diagnose, you didn't actually have a DSM-5 diagnosis that Amber Heard suffers from either borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, correct?
That's not correct.
In fact, your report says Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder. Would you agree?
Yes, I did say that in also what designation was that? I believe January 18th that report was included? Yes.
Okay. And that's what you said at that time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I said a little bit more than that as well.
You said, and I'll read it, I'll quote it, quote, based on the combined results of my interview with Ms. Heard, behavioral observations, psychometric test data, and review of the available records, Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder, BHPD. That's
Yes.
what you wrote in your report as one of your conclusions, correct?
And that's a DSM-5 diagnosis.
And it did not say that you were diagnosing with a DSM-5 for borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, did it?
That's what it says in different semantics.
Oh, so what you meant to
It
say...
did not use the words you just said.
Now, let's talk about the treatment records that you said that you reviewed. But I'm going to start with Rocky Pennington. Your testimony was that out of the blue, Amber hit Rocky Pennington, correct?
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I did reference Ms. Pennington's deposition that Ms. Heard struck Ms. Pennington in the face.
In
Yes.
fact, Ms. Pennington testified that she hit Ms. Heard. And in response to that, she can't recall, but Ms. Heard either pushed or slapped her, correct?
I don't recall.
That's a pretty important distinction, don't you think?
My recollection is that there was some sort of violence both ways in the relationship. Either way, it seemed that both of them might have been unstable. I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
So now we have an evaluation of Rocky Pennington?
No, I just said, but that was not relevant to my opinion because I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
But you testified to that on direct that that was a factor, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, wouldn't it make a big difference if Amber struck first or just responded back?
Given the dynamic, not necessarily. No, it would not have.
So now you're an expert on Rocky Pennington and her dynamics with Amber Heard. I'll withdraw. Okay, so now let's talk about Dr. Cowan. You not only reviewed his treatment records and his text messages and documents, but you also attended his deposition, did you not?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that Amber told him about Depp physically abusing her contemporaneous with the events?
I don't recall specifically his words, but I remember him recalling that she had disclosed abuse in their treatment, yes.
And do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he received a text message contemporaneous that Johnny did a number on me tonight. I'm safe in my support tonight, but I need some real help. Do you remember him testifying to that?
I don't remember the testimony, but I do remember seeing that text message as one of the exhibits.
And do you remember Dr. Cowan testifying that on another occasion, Amber sent him a text, Johnny beat me up pretty good last night, end of quote.
Again,
Not in this instance. She can rely on it. She testified.
Overruled.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't need to argue that hard, I guess. Do you recall that? Hard, I guess. Do you recall that?
Again, I don't recall the testimony, but I do remember that being an exhibit. I've seen it.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that not only did he believe Amber in her reporting of the abuse by Depp, but that she had no ulterior motive?
I actually don't recall that. I'm not saying that it didn't occur.
Okay. Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he believed the relationship was toxic and he was concerned for Amber's physical well-being?
I do recall him saying that he believed the relationship was toxic.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying in that deposition that you were present for, referring to Mr. Depp, quote, his controlling nature, jealousy and suspiciousness, addiction to drugs and alcohol, and violent and indulgent temper? Do you recall him using those terms to describe Mr. Depp?
I remember thinking that would be an inappropriate impression for a treating provider of a different person to give, but I do recall him making that statement.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that if he pushed her, she was going to push him back? And I never had the impression that she was the provocateur, but that she was indicating to me she had a hard time, de-escalating these types of situations.
Yes.
Okay. And do you also recall him saying that she didn't say she pushed him, she just said, I got right back up? She told me that he pushed her down and she got right back up.
I remember him saying that Ms. Heard told him that, yes.
And do you recall him testifying, you could interpret it that way? I kind of interpret it more, metaphorically, that when somebody comes at her, she goes back at them, in a similar way, whether it's verbally or she protects herself. Do you recall that?
I recall something along those lines, but it was a 6 or 7 hour deposition, so the specifics are not fresh in my mind.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan specifically testifying that he believed Amber Heard when she reported the physical abuse by Mr. Depp?
I recall him saying that and following it up with a statement that you have to take the patient at their word when you're the therapist.
You recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall him saying that he believed her? That he found her believable?
Yes, that he found her believable.
Okay. And he also testified that he did not diagnose Amber with borderline personality disorder. Do you recall that testimony?
He also testified that he doesn't use diagnoses, but yes, I do recall that.
And do you recall that it was those words were in his notes, but he said he had written that down, but then he discounted it and determined that that was not correct for her?
Oh, you want to approach?
All right, now let's jump to Amy Banks. Dr. Banks is a psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, she went to medical school at Georgetown, and she did her psychiatric training at Harvard Medical School, correct?
I believe that's correct. I don't recall 100%.
All right, and she was a psychiatrist in Massachusetts that Amber Heard had reached out to after the Australia incident to try to help her relationship with Mr. Depp, correct? Let me back up. You attended Dr. Banks' deposition as well, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And Dr. Banks testified to that, correct?
I don't remember if she testified to that. I don't have the notes right in front of me or the deposition transcript.
All right. Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that she understood that Amber was in a relationship with Johnny Depp that had gotten violent and out of control?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Do you recall Amy Banks testifying that they had physical altercations and his drug use had escalated and Amber felt she was at risk?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Amy Banks testifying that Amber was reporting the violence by Mr. Depp and it was not consensual?
I recall Dr. Banks stating that Ms. Heard was reporting violence to her, yes. I do not recall a statement about consent.
Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that there was discussion about Mr. Depp cutting off his finger, and she said only that it was a middle of one of these very kind of out-of-control escalated fights, and that did make a fairly big impact on me?
I remember something like that.
All right. Do you recall that Dr. Banks concluded that Amber was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I don't recall that.
Okay.